You can probably name a handful of Bible miracles without even trying. The Red Sea splitting in two. Daniel in the lion's den, a man swallowed by a great fish. Maybe a few more if you grew up in church. Fire on a mountain, a burning bush, walls falling at a shout, 10, maybe 15. That's what most people can list. There are more than 75 distinct, undeniable miracles recorded in the Old Testament alone. That is roughly 3 times the number Jesus performed in all 4 Gospels combined. We told the story of every miracle of Jesus. This is the story that came first, and you have been reading these miracles your whole life, scattered. Here is what almost no one has ever told you about them. We were handed these stories one at a time. A sea here, a fish there, some fire on a mountain. Pulled apart like that, they look random, a God simply showing off. But line them up in the order they happen, and a pattern rises out of the pages. Every miracle in the Old Testament is answering one single question. Whose world is this? And God does not answer it all at once. He answers it one piece at a time. First, he proves that owns the water, then the bread, then the human body, and finally, at the one thing nothing on earth can undo, death itself. 4 domains claimed in order, and every one of them rehearsing for the day one man would claim all 4 at once. This is the pattern you have never seen, and it begins before the nation of Israel even exists. It starts with the largest miracle in the entire Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There is nothing, and then there is everything. He does not build it. He does not shape it from something older. He speaks, "Let there be light," and there was light. Light, sky, sea, land, every living thing, each one called into being by a voice. This is the template for every miracle that follows. Because a miracle is not God breaking the rules of his world, it is the same voice that made the world narrowed down to a single moment. When the sea splits, it is this voice. When the dead rise, it is this voice. The God of the Old Testament is not visiting creation from outside. He made it. It answers to him. And the first thing that voice does after making the world is form a human being from dust and breathe him alive. But the world he made does not stay good. Violence fills the earth, and God does something that proves the first point completely. He unmakes it. The same waters he separated at creation, he lets back in. The flood is not only judgment, it is the Creator showing that what he spoke into place, he can speak back out. One family survives in a wooden box on the water. The world begins again. Generations later, humanity gathers on a plain and builds a tower to make a name for itself. God comes down, confuses their language, and scatters them across the earth with nothing but a word. Then comes fire. 2 cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, so violent that their cry reaches heaven. God rains down burning sulfur out of the sky. Remember this image, fire falling from heaven as judgment. Because 1,000 years from now, on a mountain called Carmel, that same fire will fall again and settle who the real God is. One family is told to run and not to look back. Lot's wife looks back, and she becomes a pillar of salt. The God who can speak a world into being can stop a person mid-step. Whose world is this? Even a backward glance answers it. But judgment is only half of what these first miracles show. The other half is life, coming from places life should be impossible. Abraham is 100 years old. His wife Sarah is 90. Her body, the text says, is as good as dead, and God promises them a son. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Sarah laughs, and then Sarah gives birth, life out of a dead womb. Hold on to that. It is the seed of the pattern's final move. Then God asks Abraham to give that son back on an altar on a mountain. At the last moment, a ram is caught in a thicket. A substitute dies so the son can live. And one night, Abraham's grandson Jacob wrestles a stranger until dawn and walks away limping, blessed, and renamed Israel. Creation, a flood, fire from heaven, a child from a dead womb, a new name at daybreak. Before Israel takes a single breath, the rule is already set. This God owns creation, owns judgment, and owns life itself. And the people he just promised to build into a nation are about to spend 400 years as slaves in a land that worships 1,000 gods of its own. The next time God shows his power, it will be aimed straight at every one of them. 1,000 gods ruled Egypt, and God had a word for every single one of them. Moses is 80 years old tending sheep in the wilderness when he sees something that makes no sense. A bush is on fire, but the bush is not burning up. He turns aside to look, and the voice of God comes out of the flame. Take off your sandals. The place where you are standing is holy ground. I am the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. God tells him to go back to Egypt, the place Moses fled from 40 years ago, and demand the release of an entire enslaved nation. Moses asks who he should say has sent him, and God answers with the most important sentence in the Old Testament. I am who I am. Tell them I am has sent you. Not I was, not I will be. The God of the Bible is the self-existent one, always present, never contingent, beholden to nothing. But Moses is afraid they won't believe him, so God gives him 3 signs before the first plague ever falls. Moses throws his staff on the ground tonight, and it becomes a serpent. He picks it up by the tail, and it is a staff again. God controls the ground, then God tells Moses to put his hand inside his cloak. He pulls it out, and it is leprous, white as snow. He puts it back inside the cloak, draws it out again, and it is fully restored. God controls the body. Before a single plague falls, God has already answered the question in miniature. He owns the ground under their feet and the body they walk around in. Egypt is not a nation with some gods on the side. It is a theology. Every aspect of nature has a face and a name. The Nile is a god, the frogs are a god, the sun is a god. Pharaoh himself is a god. Egypt is a pantheon with a nation built around it. God does not ask Pharaoh to have a theological debate. He issues a declaration. On all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. That is the thesis. The plagues are not a random disaster. They are a war, and God names the combatants himself. Plague 1. Moses strikes the Nile with his staff. Every drop of water in Egypt turns to blood. This is aimed directly at Hapi, the god of the Nile, the source of all life in Egypt. The first strike goes to the heart of the country. Plague 2. Frogs from the Nile, from the ditches, from everywhere at once, filling every house in Egypt. Heket was the Egyptian goddess of fertility and birth. She had the head of a frog. God turned her own symbol against Egypt. Plague 3 and 4. Gnats from the dust, then swarms of flies, thick enough to darken the air in every Egyptian home. Plague 5. Every Egyptian livestock animal, the cattle, the donkeys, the camels, falls dead. But not one Israelite animal dies. Apis was the sacred bull of Memphis, the most revered animal in all of Egypt, worshipped as a living god. The 5th plague walked into his temple and struck him down. Plague 6, boil breaking out on every Egyptian and every animal left alive, so severe that the magicians cannot even stand before Pharaoh. Plague 7, hail, the largest hailstorm in Egypt's recorded history, lightning blazing to the ground, flattening every field. Plague 8, a wind from the east, and then the sky goes dark, an east wind bearing locusts until every green thing left in Egypt is stripped bare. Plague 9, 3 days of darkness, Redophos, so thick the text says you could feel it. Ra was the supreme god of Egypt, the sun, source of all life and power. For 3 days God turned him off. But in the houses of the Israelites there was light. 9 plagues, 9 gods humiliated. Pharaoh will not let the people go. So God sends one more, and this one does not target a statue. The 10th plague is the death of the firstborn in every household in Egypt that is not covered by a sign. But God gives Israel an exit from the judgment. Take a lamb without blemish, slaughter it at twilight, take the blood and mark the top and sides of the doorframe. When the destroyer sees the blood, it will pass over. At midnight the Lord passes through Egypt, and every firstborn from the son of Pharaoh to the son of the slave dies. A great cry goes up from Egypt. There is not a house where someone is not dead. And then there is Pharaoh. He is not merely a king. Egypt worships him as a living god, son of Ra, divine ruler of the world. 9 times Moses has stood before this man. 9 times Pharaoh has hardened his heart. Now the God of Egypt cannot save his own firstborn son. Whose world is this? In the darkest hours of that night, even Pharaoh knew the answer. Go, take your people, take your flocks, take everything. Just go. 600,000 men, plus women and children, pour out of Egypt in one night, after 400 years, because of 10 acts of power. Each plague was a precision strike, not random destruction, targeted demolition, one deity at a time. Egypt trusted a pantheon. God dismantled it one deity at a time. And by the 10th plague, nothing stood. But here's what you need to carry forward from this chapter. This pattern does not end here. 1,000 years from now, on Mount Carmel, the question will be asked again, Baal or the Lord? And God will answer it the same way he answered it in Egypt. And in Babylon, the last great empire, 3 men will walk into a furnace rather than bow to a golden idol, and the fire itself will refuse to touch them. Egypt, Carmel, Babylon. The duel with false gods is a thread that runs the length of the entire Old Testament. 10 plagues, 10 gods unmade, and one enslaved nation walking out of the most powerful empire on earth in a single night. The God of the Bible did not negotiate with Egypt's gods. He named them, found them, and shut them down. Hapi fell, Heket fell, Apis fell, Ra fell. The living God on the throne fell. I am still stood. The pattern you are watching is this. Every time the world asks, whose world is this? God answers by going straight to the thing the rival God was supposed to control. In Egypt, God claimed a domain as fundamental as the water you drink, the land that feeds you, the body you live in, and the firstborn son you would give your life for. He proved he owns all of it, and he did it in 10 rounds. Freeing a people is one thing. Keeping them alive in a desert is another. Freeing a people is one thing. Keeping them alive in a desert is another. The moment Israel walks out of Egypt, God does not leave them to navigate alone. He gives them a pillar of cloud by day, towering, unmistakable, visible to 2 million people at once. And by night the same column burns. The Lord went before them by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. Cloud in the daytime, fire in the night. God is their compass, their light source, and their shelter, all in one. It does not lift, not once. For 40 years of wilderness wandering, the cloud is there. But Pharaoh changes his mind. 600 elite chariots, plus every chariot in Egypt, pour out behind the escaping nation. Israel is trapped. The sea is ahead, the army is behind, and they are terrified. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Moses stretches his staff over the water. A strong east wind blows all night, and in the morning the sea is gone. Walls of water standing still on either side. A dry road through the bottom of the sea. All night Israel walks through on dry ground. The Egyptian army follows them in, and Moses stretches his hand out again. The sea crashes back. Every chariot, every horseman, the entire army gone. Israel saw the great power the Lord displayed against Egypt, and they feared the Lord and believed in him. This is the defining miracle of the Old Testament. Everything else, every prophet, every wilderness, every later parting of water points back to this one morning. 3 days into the wilderness, and they find water. But the water is bitter. They cannot drink it. They call it Mara, the Hebrew word for bitter, and they turn on Moses. God shows Moses a piece of wood. Moses throws it into the pool. The water becomes sweet. First miracle of the wilderness, God owns the water. 6 weeks in the desert. The food they left Egypt with is gone. And in the evening, something extraordinary happens. Quail, thousands of them, fall over the camp. Meat from nowhere, delivered to a desert. And in the morning, the ground is white. Thin flakes on the ground like frost. The people look at it and say, Manna, what is it? Moses answers, this is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. 6 mornings a week, every week, for 40 years. Bread falling from the sky. No bakery, no field, no rain on a crop, just bread. Produced out of nothing from the same God who spoke the world into being. Water first at the Red Sea, now sweetened at Marah. Bread now falling every morning. The domains are beginning to stack. The water runs out again. At Rephidim, the people quarrel with Moses. Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us with thirst? God tells Moses, take your staff. Go to the rock at Horeb, strike it. Moses strikes the rock. Water pours out. Enough water for a nation of 1,000,000. From a crack in a desert rock, a sea parted, bitter water sweetened, bread from the sky, water from a rock. God owns the two things that kill you in a wilderness, and he is proving it miracle by miracle. And then Amalek attacks. Moses, Aaron, and Hur climb to the top of a hill. Moses holds up his staff. When his hands are raised, Israel advances. When his hands drop from fatigue, Amalek gains ground. Aaron and Hur find a stone for Moses to sit on. They hold his arms up one on each side until sunset. Amalek is defeated, not by superior soldiers, but by a man with his arms held up in prayer. The battle belongs to God. The sword is only there as long as the hands are raised. Years pass in the wilderness, and the people's patience runs out again. They speak against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in this wilderness? There is no food, there is no water, and then Akrikstakt is snakes. Venomous serpents, fiery serpents, the text sees, and people are dying. The people come to Moses and confess, we have sinned. They ask him to pray. God's answer is strange. Make a serpent of bronze. Set it on a pole. Anyone who looks at it will live. Moses makes it. A bronze serpent coiled around a pole, raised up in the middle of the camp. And when the dying look up, they live. Death met by a lifted symbol. Life granted by looking up. Jesus will quote this exact moment. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. A dying people, a lifted symbol, a look that heals. John 3:14 is not starting a metaphor, and it is recognizing a shape. The sea parted, bitter water turned sweet. Manna fell every morning. Quail came in the evening, water burst from a rock, a battle was won by prayer, and a bronze serpent lifted up pulled the dying back from the edge. First the water, then the bread. The two things a wilderness uses to kill you, God owns both of them. Water and bread, the first two domains claimed, the pattern is building. But the God who feeds you is also the God you cannot touch carelessly. But the God who feeds you is also the God you cannot touch carelessly. And some of his miracles are not rescue. Some of them are wound. Moses has just led 2,000,000 people out of Egypt. They are camped at the foot of a mountain, and then God says, I am coming down. On the third day, thunder breaks over Sinai. The mountain is wrapped in fire and smoke. A trumpet blast sounds, and it keeps getting louder. The whole mountain quakes. Every person in the camp trembles, and they beg Moses, you speak to us. Do not let God speak to us, or we will die. Moses alone walks into the thick darkness where God is. This is the first great truth of chapter 4. God's presence is real, and it is not tame. The same fire that came down on Sinai is now inside the tabernacle, alive, burning on the altar, lit by God himself. Aaron is the high priest. His sons Nadab and Abihu are priests beside him. On the very day the tabernacle is consecrated, Nadab and Abihu take their censers and put fire in them, fire that God did not command. And fire comes out from before the Lord and consumes them. Leviticus 10:2. It is one of the most severe sentences in the Old Testament. Aaron says nothing. He does not weep. The text records, and Aaron held his peace. The same fire that came down as blessing on the altar came down as judgment when the altar was approached carelessly. Later in the wilderness, Moses marries a Cushite woman. His sister Miriam objects. She questions Moses' authority, and suddenly the cloud, the presence of God, lifts from the tabernacle and stops. God calls Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to the entrance of the tabernacle, and he speaks. He says, with Moses I speak face to face. Miriam, why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? The cloud lifts, and Miriam is leprous, white as snow. Aaron turns to Moses and begs. Moses cries out to God, "Oh God, please heal her." God hears. Miriam is healed, but she must wait outside the camp for 7 days first. The wound was real. Then comes the darkest miracle of the wilderness. A man named Korah decides he has had enough of Moses. Korah gathers 250 leaders and confronts Moses and Aaron. You take too much on yourselves. The whole congregation is holy. Moses falls on his face, and then he says, in the morning the Lord will show who is his. The next morning Moses warns the congregation, "Move back from these men, touch nothing that is theirs." And the ground splits open. The earth opens its mouth and swallows them, their households, every person who belonged to Korah, and all their goods. They go down alive into Sheol, and the earth closes back over them. They are gone, and then fire goes out from the Lord and consumes the 250 men who were offering incense. 2 miracles, one aimed downward, one aimed outward. The earth and the fire both answer God. The rebellion is over, but the grumbling is not. The congregation blames Moses and Aaron for the deaths. So God gives a different kind of sign, not fire, not a crack in the earth, something quieter and stranger. Moses collects a staff from the leader of each of the 12 tribes, and Aaron's staff for the tribe of Levi. He places them overnight in the tabernacle before the Lord one night. That is all. Moses enters in the morning and brings out the staffs. 11 are still dead wood. Aaron's staff has sprouted. It has put forth buds, blossomed, and borne ripe almonds overnight. A dead stick chose no one. God made it bloom. The question of who speaks for him is settled, not by argument, but by life from dead wood. God keeps that staff in the tabernacle as a permanent sign. Dead wood that once bloomed, a warning and a witness. Israel is near the end of its wilderness wandering. A pagan king named Balak is terrified of them. He sends for a prophet named Balaam, a pagan diviner with a real reputation. He wants Israel cursed. God tells Balaam not to go, then he tells him he may go, but only to say what God tells him to say. Balaam saddles his donkey. On the road, the angel of the Lord stands in the way, toward drawn. Balaam cannot see it, his donkey can. The donkey swerves off the road into a field. Balaam beats her and turns her back. Again the angel stands in the way. The donkey presses against a wall and crushes Balaam's foot. He beats her again. A third time the angel blocks the way. The donkey lies down under Balaam. He beats her with his staff. Then the Lord opens the donkey's mouth. She says, "What have I done to you, that you have struck me these 3 times?" And Balaam, a prophet, argues with his donkey. Then God opens Balaam's eyes. The angel of the Lord stands before him, sword drawn, blazing. The angel tells him, "If the donkey had not turned aside, I would have killed you." The one talking animal in the Old Testament, and she was seeing more clearly than the prophet beside her. 6 miracles, a burning mountain, 2 priests consumed by fire, a prophetess struck with leprosy, the earth swallowing rebels alive, dead wood that bloomed, and a donkey who saw what a prophet could not. Every one of these is a miracle. Every one of them answers the same question the sea and the manna answered, "Whose world is this?" But these are a different kind of answer. Not God can feed you, not God can carry you through the sea. These say God's holiness is not negotiable. Approach it carelessly, and the power that saves is also the power that destroys. The tabernacle fire that blessed the altar is the same fire that fell on Nadab and Abihu. There is no version of God's holiness that is safe, only one that is merciful. Getting close to God is the most dangerous thing in the Old Testament, and also the only thing that makes a person alive. That tension, holiness and mercy, wound and healing, does not resolve in the wilderness. It points forward to a priest who could stand where no one else could stand. And now the wandering ends. The miracles are about to turn outward into a land that has to be taken. The wandering ends. The land has to be taken, and God himself is about to enlist creation to take it. After 40 years in the desert, the nation of Israel stands at the edge of the Jordan River. The river is in flood season. It should be impossible to cross. The priests carry the Ark of the Covenant to the water's edge, and the moment their feet touch the river, it stops. The water piles up in a heap far upstream at a city called Adam. A nation of millions walks across a flooded river on dry ground. It is the Red Sea all over again. 12 stones are pulled from the middle of the riverbed and stacked on the far bank, so no one ever forgets who opened the water. Across the Jordan, the first city stands locked and barred, Jericho, its gates sealed tight. God's battle plan is unlike anything a general would invent. March around the city once a day for 6 days. 7 priests with 7 trumpets. Silence. On the seventh day they march around 7 times, then the trumpets, then the shout, and then the walls fall flat. Not one battering ram, not one siege ladder, just sound and a word of command from the God who owns the ground those stones were built on. A coalition of 5 Amorite kings attacks Israel's new ally Gideon. Joshua marches through the night. God throws the enemy into a panic. Then he throws something else, hailstones from heaven. More enemies die from the hailstones than from the sword. The sky itself is fighting, but there is not enough daylight to finish the battle. So Joshua prays and speaks one of the most extraordinary sentences in the Bible. Sun, stand still over Gibeon. And the sun stopped in the midst of heaven about a full day. There was no day like that before it or after it, when the Lord heeded the voice of a man. Egypt had a sun god, Ra, the most powerful deity in its whole pantheon. Israel's God just commanded Ra's fire wheel to stop, and it obeyed. A generation later, Israel falls into a pattern, faithless, oppressed, then crying out to God. This time, the oppressor is Midian. And the man God chooses is hiding, threshing wheat in a winepress, afraid. His name is Gideon, and he is not sure God is still paying attention. He asks for a sign. He lays a wool fleece on the threshing floor and asks God to make it wet, and in the ground around it dry. Morning, he wrings out the fleece, a bowl of water, the ground around it, dry. Then he asks for the reverse. One more night, fleece dry, ground wet. And that is exactly what happens. God has chosen Gideon. Now God shrinks Gideon's army. 32,000 men. God says, too many. Anyone who is afraid, go home. 22,000 leave. 10,000 remain. God says, still too many. God tells Gideon to take the men down to the water and watch how they drink. The ones who lap water with their hands, eyes up, watching. 300 of them. Those are your army. 300 men against a Midianite army described as thick as locusts. Gideon sneaks into the enemy camp the night before the battle and overhears a soldier telling his dream, a loaf of barley bread tumbling down and flattening their tent. God has already told the enemy they are going to lose in their own dreams. In the dark, 300 men divide into 3 groups. Each carries a torch hidden in a clay jar and a trumpet in his hand. Trumpets, shattering jars, torches blazing, a shout, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. And the enemy army collapses into chaos. 300 men, no swords drawn. The Lord set every man's sword against his comrade, and then there is Samson. His birth is announced by an angel. He is set apart from before he is born a Nazarite, never to cut his hair. The Spirit of the Lord comes on him, and what follows is unlike anything else in the Old Testament. He meets a young lion on a road in the vineyards of Timnah, and tears it apart with his bare hands. He is captured by the Philistines and bound with new ropes, and he snaps them like thread. He finds the jawbone of a donkey on the ground, and with it kills 1,000 men. He arrives at the city of Gaza. The Philistines bar the gates and plan to kill him at dawn. He gets up at midnight and tears the gates of Gaza off their posts, along with the gateposts themselves, and carries them on his shoulders to the top of a hill. His strength is hidden in a secret, an absurd one, uncut hair. Delilah finds the secret. His head is shaved while he sleeps. The Spirit of the Lord departs from him. He is captured, blinded, bound with bronze chains, and made to grind grain in a Philistine prison. But in the prison, his hair begins to grow again. The Philistines bring him out to entertain 3,000 of them in the temple of their god Dagon. He asks the boy leading him to guide his hands to the 2 central pillars. O Lord God, remember me and strengthen me just this once. He pushes. The pillars give. The whole temple comes down, killing more Philistines in his death than in all his life. The Jordan, the walls, the sun, the hail, a fleece on a threshing floor. 300 men with torches, and 1 man whose strength lived in his hair. When Israel had no king, creation fought for it. The sea god was now the land god, the sun god, the storm god. Every domain Egypt's idols only claimed, the real God actually controlled. But a holy God in the middle of a flawed people is a loaded weapon, and the next miracles prove it. A holy God in the middle of a flawed people is a loaded weapon. These miracles prove it. Israel has been in the land for generations, and they are losing. The Philistines have routed them twice in open battle. So the elders of Israel have an idea. Bring the Ark of the Covenant into the battle. If God's throne is on the battlefield, God must fight for them. That is not how this works. The Philistines hear the roar from Israel's camp when the ark arrives, and for a moment they are afraid, but they fight anyway, and they take the ark. 30,000 Israelites die that day. Eli's 2 sons die. The ark is gone. When the news reaches the old priest Eli, he falls backward off his seat and breaks his neck. The Philistines carry their prize to Ashdod and set it in the temple of their god Dagon. 2 gods in the same room, except one of them is not a god. The next morning, the Philistine priests open the temple doors. Dagon has fallen, face down on the ground before the ark. They set him back up. They tell no one. The next morning, they open the doors again. Dagon has fallen again, and this time his head and his hands are broken off on the threshold. Only the torso remains, the head that proclaimed his divinity, gone. The hands that held his power, gone. A rival god prostrate, dismembered, worshipping. 1 Samuel 5:5 says, "The priests of Dagon will not step on his threshold from that day to this." The place of his humiliation becomes a monument to it. The ark does not sit quietly. It never does. God's hand is heavy on the people of Ashdod. A plague breaks out, tumors, painful and spreading. The Philistines move the ark to Gath. The plague follows. They move it to Ekron. The city cries out in terror. Every city the ark enters is struck. The plague does not respect borders. 7 months. That is how long the Philistines try to keep it. 7 months of plague and tumors and dread. And finally they ask their own priests, how do we send this thing back? Their diviners give them a test. If this is really the God of Israel, the ark will know its own way home. Take 2 milk cows that have never been yoked. Tie them to the cart, put the ark on it, let them go. A mother cow separated from her calves should turn back. Every instinct says turn back. The cows go straight. They do not turn to the right or to the left. They walk straight toward Israelite territory, lowing all the way, lowing all the way. They grieve every step, and they do not stop. The Philistine lords follow behind to watch. They are looking for proof. They get it. The cart enters the town of Beth-Shemesh. The people of Israel see it coming and shout for joy. The cart stops beside a great stone in the field of Joshua. The Levites take the ark down. The cows are offered as a burnt offering. God came home on his own terms. Years pass. David is king. He wants to bring the ark to Jerusalem, to the city he has made the capital of Israel. He gathers 30,000 men. There is a new cart. There is music. There is celebration. But there is a problem. God gave Israel precise instructions for how the ark was to be carried, by Levites, on their shoulders, with poles. A new cart is not in those instructions. When the oxen stumble, a man named Uzzah reaches out to steady the ark. He touches it. God strikes him dead. On the spot, he meant to help. His intention was good. It does not matter. David is angry, and then David is afraid. He asks, how can the ark of the Lord come to me? He leaves it at the house of a man named Obed-Edom for 3 months. And Obed-Edom's house is blessed in every way for those 3 months. The same God who strikes Uzzah dead also blesses the house that hosts him faithfully. Holy is not a word that softens, it is a word that cuts. Now the Philistines again. Samuel has called all Israel to Mizpah to repent and pray. The Philistines hear there is a gathering and send their army. They see an opportunity. Samuel is in the middle of offering a sacrifice when the Philistines approach. He does not stop. And God thunders. The text says he thundered with a great voice and threw the Philistines into confusion. Israel pursues them and routs them. No ark needed this time, just a prayer and a sacrifice. Afterward, Samuel takes a stone and sets it up. He calls it Ebenezer. Ebenezer, hitherto the Lord has helped us. Stone of help. God's power marked in rock. Look at what just happened. A pagan idol, one prostrate. A plague that follows a box across a country. Cows that grieve and walk straight anyway. A man who reaches out to help, struck dead. And then a nation, routed by thunder while a priest is still praying. The presence of God is not a symbol. It is not a metaphor. It is a live wire. Whose world is this? Even Dagon knows he ended up on his face twice to prove it. And now, for the first time, the miracles get a face. A single prophet who calls down fire. And now, for the first time, the miracles get a face. A single prophet who calls down fire. Israel has traded the Lord for Baal, the god the Canaanites said ruled the rain and the storm. So God sends a man named Elijah, and Elijah walks straight into the palace. He says one sentence, "There will be no rain except by my word." And he is gone, no rain, no dew, for 3 years, and the God who supposedly controls the storm does nothing. 1 Kings 17:1, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word." God tells Elijah to hide. He sends him to a brook called Cherith, east of the Jordan, and then the ravens come, morning and evening, every day, bread and meat brought by birds. In the middle of a famine he helped cause. Even the bread domain is already in God's hands. The famine cannot touch the man God is feeding. The brook dries up. God tells Elijah to go further still, to Zarephath in Sidon. Enemy territory. At the town gate, a widow is gathering sticks. She has one handful of flour left, one last measure of oil. She tells him plainly, "This is the last meal." Then she and her son will starve. Elijah says, "Feed me first, and then watch what the God of Israel does." She makes the cake, and the jar of flour does not run out. The jug of oil does not run dry for weeks, for months. Through the entire famine, the bread domain already claimed in the wilderness is now in a prophet's hands in a pagan city in the worst famine in a generation. And then the boy gets sick. He gets worse. And then there is no breath left in him. The widow confronts Elijah. She blames him. She is not wrong to be broken. Elijah takes the boy upstairs, lays him on his own bed, and cries out to God. 3 times he stretches himself over the child. 3 times he prays, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." And the boy's soul comes back into him. For the first time in the Bible, death gives someone back. Water, bread, and now death. God has touched every domain but one, and this is how he touches the last. Elijah carries the boy downstairs. He says, "Your son lives. Now I know that you are a man of God," she says, "and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth." 3 years into the drought, God tells Elijah to go back and end it. He calls King Ahab, the 450 prophets of Baal, and all Israel to Mount Carmel for a contest. The rule is simple. 2 altars, 2 bulls, call on your God. The God who answers by fire, he is God. The 450 prophets of Baal go first. They call from morning until noon. Nothing. They cry louder. They cut themselves. The sky does not move. Elijah mocks them. Cry louder. Maybe he is asleep. Maybe he is on a journey. Baal, the storm god, cannot make a spark. At the evening sacrifice, Elijah steps forward. He rebuilds the altar with 12 stones, one for each tribe. Then he does something astonishing. He drenches the altar in water. 4 jars, 12 jars total. The trench fills with water. Then Elijah prays. 1 prayer, 40 words, and fire falls. It consumes the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, the water in the trench. All of it gone. The fire that fell on Sodom 1,000 years before has fallen again on a mountain as proof. All Israel falls on their faces. The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. Baal, the fire god, the storm god, the Lord of rain, answered with silence. The real God answered with 1 prayer. It is not over. Elijah tells Ahab, "Go eat and drink. I hear the sound of rain." He sends his servant 7 times to look at the sea. Nothing, 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 nothing. And then, a cloud the size of a man's hand rising from the sea. Then the sky goes black with cloud. The wind rises, and rain, real rain, falls on Israel for the first time in 3 years. Elijah flees. Jezebel wants him dead. He runs to the wilderness and asks God to take his life. An angel touches him twice. "Arise and eat. The journey is too great for you." Even prophets need bread. Years later, a new king sends soldiers to bring Elijah in, 50 men. "Come down, man of God." "If I am a man of God," Elijah says, "let fire come down from heaven." And fire comes down. A second company comes, same answer. The third captain comes trembling and pleads. His life is spared, Elijah knows. God has told him, today you will be taken. He walks with Elisha toward the Jordan. At the Jordan, Elijah takes his mantle, rolls it up, and strikes the water. The Jordan parts. They cross on dry ground, just as Moses and Joshua crossed before. Elisha asks for a double portion. Elijah says, if you see me taken, it is yours. And as they walk and talk, it comes. A chariot of fire, horses of fire, sweeping between them, and Elijah goes up, in a whirlwind, into heaven, a living man taken alive. One of only 2 men in all of Scripture who never see death. He does not die, he departs, a drought that mocked the storm god, bread in a famine, a dead boy breathing again, fire from heaven 3 times, rain from one small cloud. A river parted, and a man who never died. The last domain has been touched. Death gave someone back for the first time, and his successor will touch it again and again and again. And his successor will touch it again and again and again. Elijah is gone, taken up in fire and wind, and his cloak falls back to earth. Elisha picks it up, walks back to the Jordan, and strikes the water with Elijah's cloak. The water parts, the same God, the same river, the same word passed from hand to hand like a torch. He reaches Jericho, and the people meet him with bad news. The water is bad, it is killing the land. Elisha calls for a new bowl and fills it with salt and then pours it into the spring. The water turns clean, it stays clean. Then a sobering note, a gang of youths jeers at the prophet. 2 bears come out of the woods. Mocking the voice God speaks through carries a weight the text does not soften, and neither will we. 3 kings march their armies into the desert to fight Moab and run out of water. Elisha prophesies, dig ditches. You will hear no wind, see no rain, and the valley will fill. By morning water flows in from Edom, the ditches fill. 3 armies drink. A widow comes to Elisha with nothing. Her husband is dead. Her sons are about to be taken as debt slaves. She has 1 small jar of oil. Elisha says, go borrow every empty jar your neighbors will give you. Then shut the door and pour. The oil stops only when there are no more jars. God filled exactly as much as she was willing to go get. A wealthy woman in Shunem has been feeding Elisha for years. She even built him a room on the roof. She needs nothing. But Elisha notices she has no son, and her husband is old. He calls her back. About this time next year, you will hold a son. She has a son. The boy grows, and one day, in the harvest field, he collapses with a head wound and dies by noon. His mother takes him, rides hard for the prophet, and will not be turned away by anyone. Elisha enters the room alone, shuts the door, prays, then stretches himself over the boy, eye to eye, hand to hand. The child's body grows warm. He sneezes 7 times and opens his eyes. His mother walks in. She falls at the prophet's feet. Her son is standing beside her, famine in the land. Elisha's company cooks a stew from wild gourds. 1 taste, and they cry out, there is death in the pot. Elisha throws flour into the pot. Serve it. No harm is in the pot. Bread restores what death corrupted. A man brings 20 loaves of barley bread. Elisha says, give it to 100 men. The servant asks, how? The Lord says, they shall eat and have some left over. 8 centuries before a hillside in Galilee, the pattern has already been drawn. Naaman, commander of the Aramean army, powerful, decorated, and a leper. A captive Israelite servant girl tells Naaman's wife, there is a prophet in Samaria who could heal him. Naaman travels with horses, chariots, silver, and gold, and expects a dramatic healing. Elisha doesn't even come to the door. Go wash in the Jordan 7 times. Naaman is furious. He almost leaves. His servants talk him back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He dips. He rises, nothing yet. On the 7th dip he rises, and his skin is clean, like the flesh of a little child. Now I know there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. The body domain, declared by the enemy who was healed. Elisha took nothing from Naaman, but Gehazi runs after him in secret and lies to collect silver and fine robes. Elisha knows. He confronts Gehazi, and the leprosy that left Naaman clings to Gehazi's skin, white as snow. The company of prophets goes to cut timber at the Jordan. A borrowed axe head flies off the handle into the river. It was borrowed. Elisha cuts a stick and throws it in. The iron floats to the surface, and the man picks it up. God cares about a borrowed tool. The God of the Exodus is also the God of an ordinary man's worry. The king of Aram tries to capture Elisha. He sends an army. Elisha prays, and the whole army goes blind. Elisha walks into the blinded army and leads them straight into Samaria. Then God opens their eyes, and they are surrounded. Later, Samaria is besieged. Famine so severe a donkey's head sells for silver. Elisha prophesies, "By tomorrow food will be cheap at the gate." God made the Aramean army hear the sound of chariots and a great host. They fled in the night and left everything behind. Elisha dies. His body is placed in a cave. Months later, Moabite raiders interrupt a funeral, and a burial party throws their dead man into the nearest available tomb, Elisha's. The dead man's body touches Elisha's bones, and the man stands up alive, a resurrection from a dead man's bones. Even in death, the prophet's life overflows. Water healed, oil that would not stop, a boy raised, leprosy cleansed, leprosy given, an iron axe that floated, a blinded army, a city saved overnight, a man raised by a dead prophet's bones. Elisha asked for a double portion of the Elijah spirit. The text delivers it, roughly twice as many miracles in one ministry at the same time. Water from nothing, bread multiplied, lepers cleansed, dead raised, all four domains in a single prophet's life. It looks like a preview of something. It is. But the miracles are about to go quiet because the kingdom is about to fall. The Jordan was the first miracle Elisha ever performed. It will not be the last water miracle in his life. The widow's oil, she borrowed every jar she could find. The moment the last jar was full, it stopped. God filled the measure she set. The Shunammite woman built Elisha a room. She asked for nothing. God gave her the thing she had stopped hoping for. The death in the pot and the feeding of 100 both happened during famine. When there is nothing, Elisha multiplies. Naaman's 7 dips were the whole point. Not the number, not the river, the obedience. The healing was in the trusting, not the technique. Jesus will later name Naaman by name, the only Old Testament leper he specifically calls out. This miracle had a long reach. Gehazi saw every miracle. He was Elisha's closest servant, and still he chose the silver, the blinded army. God led Israel's enemy into Israel's city and then showed them mercy. Elisha told the king, "Feed them and send them home." The siege of Samaria, 4 dying lepers walked toward the enemy at dawn with nothing to lose, and found an empire had fled. The bones' resurrection is unlike anything else in the catalog. No prayer, no prophet, no word, just the overflow of a holy life, still active after death, one ministry. Water from nowhere, bread from almost nothing, leprosy broken, death reversed twice, and even the bones still preaching. In one prophet's life, the whole pattern ran at full volume, and it looked exactly like a preview, because it was, but the miracles are about to go quiet, because the kingdom is about to fall. The miracles are going quiet, but not yet. Not while the kingdom still has a cliff to fall from. After Solomon, the kingdom tears in 2. 10 tribes north, 2 south, 2 thrones, 2 rival altars. Jeroboam, the first king of the north, builds golden calves and tells the people, "These are your gods." And God still speaks into the mess. But the voice is colder now, more urgent. The edge of the cliff is close. A man of God comes to Bethel, uninvited, unafraid, and speaks against Jeroboam's altar while the king is standing right there. Jeroboam stretches out his hand toward the man and shouts, "Seize him." His arm freezes. He cannot pull it back. At the same moment, the altar is torn apart. The ashes pour out, a sign, not an accident. The king's anger breaks. He asks the prophet to pray for his arm, and the prophet does. The arm is restored, judgment and mercy in the same breath. That is the signature of this God. 1 Kings 13, read it slowly. The miracle is not the withering. The miracle is what came after, the hand given back. A century later, the northern kingdom is gone, taken by Assyria. Now Assyria turns south, and Sennacherib's army surrounds Jerusalem. The Assyrian field commander stands outside the walls and mocks the city, mocks the king, mocks the Lord by name. Hezekiah takes the letter of threats inside the temple and spreads it before God in praise. Isaiah brings the answer. God has heard. He will defend the city. Sennacherib will not shoot a single arrow. That night the angel of the Lord goes out into the camp. 185,000 soldiers. One night. The largest single act of destruction in the Old Testament, and not one of them touched the city walls. Sennacherib packs up what remains and goes home. He never comes back. The God of the Old Testament owns armies. One angel, one night. An empire turned around. Hezekiah, the same king who prayed over Sennacherib's letter, is now told something worse. You are going to die. Hezekiah turns his face to the wall and weeps and prays. Before Isaiah even reaches the middle court of the palace, God turns him around. God has heard the prayer. He will add 15 years to Hezekiah's life. Isaiah orders a poultice of figs laid on the infection. The king heals. This is a miracle, and medicine at once. But Hezekiah wants a sign. How will he know this is real? God gives him the most extraordinary sign of physics in the entire Old Testament. The shadow on the stairway of Ahaz goes backward 10 steps. God reverses the sun, not a metaphor. The shadow runs backward 10 steps on a stairway anyone in Jerusalem could see. The same God who stopped the sun for Joshua now walks it backward for a sick king's faith. He owns time, 15 more years, the shadow given back. Isaiah 38 calls it a sign, a wonder, and a mercy, all three. But the strangest miracle of this chapter does not happen in Jerusalem. It happens in the belly of the sea. God tells a prophet named Jonah, go to Nineveh, the capital of the empire that will one day destroy the north. Preach to them. Jonah runs the other direction. He books passage on a ship headed to Tarshish, as far from Nineveh as a man can go. There is no running from this God. He hurls a great wind onto the sea. The sailors pray to every god they know. Nothing. They cast lots to find whose fault this is. The lot falls on Jonah. He tells them, throw me into the sea. This storm is because of me. They throw him over the side, and the sea goes calm. Then God appoints a great fish, and the great fish swallows Jonah whole, 3 days and 3 nights, in the belly of the fish in the deep. From inside the fish, Jonah prays. He describes it as Sheol, the place of the dead. He has gone as far down as a living man can go. His prayer is pure psalm. Salvation is from the Lord. Even here, even 3 days into the deep, and God speaks to the fish. The fish vomits Jonah onto dry land. Then God speaks to Jonah a second time. Go to Nineveh, and this time Jonah goes. He preaches one message through the streets of the greatest city on earth. 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Nineveh believes. The king puts on sackcloth. Every person, every animal fasts. God relents. The greatest mess, repentance in the Old Testament. An entire empire turned in 40 days by a waterlogged prophet. But the story of Jonah is not finished when Nineveh repents. It is not finished yet, not for centuries. 7 centuries after Jonah, a crowd demands a sign from Jesus. He points them to the fish. As Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The fish was always a sign, not just of Jonah, of something larger that hadn't happened yet. 3 days in the dark, and then back to the land of the living. Jonah didn't know he was preaching a resurrection. God owns the sea, the fish, the deep, and whatever waits on the other side of 3 days. That is what the sign of Jonah means. A withered hand restored, an empire's army taken in a night. The son walked backward on a stairway, a king given 15 more years. A prophet spat up from the sea after 3 days. This is a chapter of thinning miracles, but the ones that remain are immense. They still answer the question. Even as Israel collapses, God still owns the armies. He still owns the sun, he still owns the sea, and then Jonah, 3 days in the dark, 3 days in the same number that will define everything else. The sign of Jonah is the last great miracle of this chapter, and it is aimed by Jesus himself straight at an empty tomb. The miracles are fading, the kingdom is nearly gone. The last prophet who ran from God ended up preaching resurrection with every step. Whose world is this? Even at the edge of exile, the answer has not changed. And then the temple falls, the people are dragged to Babylon, and the question becomes, is he still God when his people have lost everything? The temple has fallen, the people are in chains, and the world has decided the God of Israel is finished. Babylon has taken everything, the city, the temple, the ark, the king's sons. A long column of captives walks east toward Babylon, toward the empire that worships 100 gods. The surrounding nations draw the obvious conclusion: the stronger God has won. But 3 young men from Jerusalem have a different answer. Nebuchadnezzar builds a golden image 90 feet tall and orders every nation to bow when the music plays. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do not bow. Our God is able to deliver us, but even if he does not, we will not serve your gods. The king's face changes. He orders the furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal. The soldiers who throw them in are killed by the heat at the door. Nebuchadnezzar leaps to his feet. Did we not throw 3 men into the fire? I see 4, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Remember the fire that fell at Sodom, that consumed Carmel. Here it burns at full strength, and its oil and refuses to touch them. They walk out. Their hair is not singed. Their robes are not scorched. They do not even smell of smoke. The fire that fell is judgment on Sodom. The fire that answered Elijah's prayer on Carmel. This time, it simply refuses to obey. Nebuchadnezzar decrees that no one may speak against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. On enemy soil, God wins, but Nebuchadnezzar has not learned the lesson yet. Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? While the words are still in his mouth, a voice comes from heaven. The most powerful king on earth drops to all 4s and begins to eat grass like an ox. 7 years pass, then he lifts his eyes to heaven, and his reason returns. The Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. The king writes it himself. Years later, Belshazzar throws a feast. He brings out the gold cups looted from the Jerusalem temple and drinks from them. And as they drink and praise the gods of gold and silver, a hand appears. Not a hand attached to a body, just a hand writing on the wall of the palace. The king's face goes pale, his knees knock together. The party is over. Daniel reads it, numbered, weighed, and divided. Your kingdom is finished. That very night, Babylon falls. The empire that thought it had replaced God is gone before morning. Under the new empire, Daniel rises to the top. His rivals cannot find a single flaw in him except one. He prays. His enemies manipulate the king into signing a law against it. Daniel prays anyway. 3 times a day, as always, he is thrown into a pit of lions. A stone is sealed over it. The king is miserable all night. He does not eat. He cannot sleep. He goes to the pit at dawn. Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God been able to deliver you from the lions? And Daniel answers from the bottom of the pit, my God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. They have not harmed me. A pagan king ends the chapter with a royal decree praising the God of Daniel, the living God enduring forever. The temple is gone, the land is gone, but God has just won 4 miracles on enemy soil. You cannot exile God, you cannot imprison God, you cannot incinerate what belongs to God. Now step back, 1,000 years of miracles, and the same 4 questions answered again and again. The water, God claimed it at the Red Sea, and he claimed it again at the Jordan. The sea obeys him. The bread, manna from heaven, oil that never ran dry. 20 loaves feeding 100 men with food left over. The body. Naaman the Syrian commander, 7 dips in the Jordan, and the leprosy is gone, and death. He touched it again and again. The widow's son, the Shunammite's son. A dead man revived by a prophet's bones, 4 domains, claimed across 1,000 years, by a dozen different men, in a dozen different places. And then something happens that the pattern had been pointing at all along. A man walks out of Nazareth. He steps into a boat on a stormy sea. He speaks, the water goes still, the water domain. The same answer Moses got at the Red Sea, and this time the sea answered a single voice in a boat. He takes 5 loaves and 2 fish. 5,000 people eat. 12 baskets of fragments remain. The bread domain, Elisha fed 100 from 20 loaves. He fed 5,000 from 5, with more left over than he started with. A man covered in leprosy kneels before him. He reaches out and touches him, and the leprosy is gone. The body domain. Naaman had to travel to a foreign river and dip 7 times. He reached out a hand and said, "Be clean." And a girl is dead. A boy is dead. A widow's son is dead. He goes to them and they get up. And then comes the death domain, but this time it is his own death. 3 days. The same number Jonah spent in the fish, and Jesus had said, "This is the sign you will get." On the 3rd day before dawn, something happens inside a sealed tomb. The stone rolls away. The grave clothes are folded. The tomb is empty. 1 man, 3 years, all 4 domains: the water, the bread, the body, the grave. Every claim God had been making for 1,000 years, he made them all at once, in one life, in one body. Every Old Testament miracle was a rehearsal. He was the performance. The pattern you have never seen was pointing at him all along. If this opened up the Old Testament for you, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe to this channel. We will keep going deeper.